Thank you for joining us today on 10 Minutes with the Artist, an episodic series that explores the professional practice and personal vision that guides artists. On today's episode, we're very proud to have Sadie Kolke. Sadie recently exhibited works from her series Pieces at the Memorial Union Gallery for the 2015 Baccalaureate Exhibition. Pieces is a collection of ceramic sculptures that explore beauty, imperfections, and value. Sadie often creates organic forms that invite the viewer to interact with the artwork and contemplate what makes an object unique. I'm Anthony Ferris, and this is 10 Minutes with the Artist. Thank you for joining me, Sadie. One of the things I was kind of curious about was what the early incarnations of your work look like. So, what sort of work were you making that sort of led up to this body of work?
Well, last year I started working with ceramics more. In the past I've just been working with painting and drawing more. But I took a ceramics class and I focused more on hand building instead of throwing. I didn't like throwing. That was not fun. And I actually spent the semester creating owls. I made plaster cast molds and made owl heads that I mounted onto the wall. And I did a lot of hand building, just organically making forms. And playing with the clay was something that I really enjoyed, and I love the textures. And that was one thing that inspired my body of work this semester.
Okay, so the functional work was not necessarily what you were more interested in. Hand building, though. There's this difference between the plasticity of clay, and then it changes when you fire it to be something hard, maybe has some weight to it, and it's sort of fragile. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about sort of that process of dealing with clay that you're molding and how that sort of earthy, especially with your body of work, mm-hmm. maybe how that fits into your work?
Yeah. I think it's just interesting, like you mentioned, how it becomes hard and becomes fragile, and how it holds the structure in a different way, and how the texture changes. And when I work with it, when it's wet, the clay, I enjoy making the different surfaces. And one thing that I've had to consider is how, when it becomes an actual, becomes solid, how that will affect people and how they'll interact with that. And in some cases, it's more challenging to create certain textures because I want them to be sharp, but I don't want people to hurt themselves when they experience it. And so sometimes I have to sand it a little bit or kind of just smooth out some rougher corners that I'd like to hold on to.
Well, with nature, nature has a whole bunch of different qualities to it. And as you're making these sort of natural forms, mm-hmm. How do those sort of soft or sharp edges sort of how do you make those decisions? Using that clay?
Well, for this body of work, I really focused on flowers. And flowers, for the most part, are very soft, and they have those smooth textures. And so I wasn't trying to make them too aggressive and rough, whereas when I was working with the owls, I had made a couple of freestanding owls that I fired in a wood kiln and really wanted to make them almost look like tree bark. And so I left them very rough and very aggressive in terms of textures. But when I was working with flowers, I wanted to highlight the forms and the flow of the petals and the smoothness. I did create some rough textures, but nothing as aggressive as the owls. And so I think I was able to just be more smooth and gentle about the clay.
Yeah.
With my hands and with the tools that I used.
You have these pieces, and I'm kind of curious how you would like people to interact with them.
Yeah. Originally, when I was creating the wall pieces, I wanted everybody to touch the wall pieces. That's why I chose ceramics over painting. When I go into a gallery, I sometimes get very frustrated when I can't go up and touch the work.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I look to the right and I look to the left. I'm like, is there anybody around? And then I still touch it. Shh, don't tell anyone. But, so that was one of the original reasons why I decided, to do ceramics, to create these textures, to create the forms, and have people interact with the work, because I feel like when I make things, when I when I create these pieces of work, I put so much into them, and like it's so much about what my hands create. I want people to experience that, not just like seeing it, not just visually experiencing that tactility, but physically experiencing that. So that was one of the first reasons why I chose ceramics. But then when I created some of the forms, they became very delicate, and my professors had expressed thoughts of maybe that's too delicate and people might not want to touch them. When I was giving my artist lecture and when I gave some people tours, I was like, you guys can touch them, it's cool. But that's why I created the piece that's on the pedestal away from the wall pieces, to encourage people to not be so worried about breaking them, because they're very quick little flowers that I created, but they still have those textures and still have that tactility, and really allow people to experience the work in the way that I wanted them to originally, and just hold on to that, but not risk having it fall off the wall or have something big break off and then people be sad because it's broken.
Yeah. Well, like, and I think you notice when you are looking at that piece, it's almost a mound of work.
Yeah.
And then you have your pieces on the wall, and there's some of them are connected visually, some of them are sort of separated. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this sort of aspect of parts to a whole.
Yeah. When I was originally starting, I was focusing on mosaics, and I enjoyed, that was one way that I saw people taking ceramics, putting them on the wall, was through mosaic pieces. And when I started, I had thought about making, the tiles I made now are like 10 by 10 at the minimum. Some of them are larger, some of them are a little bit smaller. But when I started, I thought about actually making these tiles and then connecting them all in like a finished piece, like making a frame and putting grout in, and like actually finishing them in that way. But as the pieces progressed and as I continued to work on them, I found that it made more sense to leave them as pieces, to fragment them, because they were representative of some of my favorite flowers, but they weren't like precise in their making, and I felt like it's just these glimpses of who I am and like what I like to make. And I mean, life is just fractions of moments, you know, all juxtaposed together, and I thought it was kind of beautiful how they weren't fully touching each other, and there was some space and some room to breathe, and then it became more about the textures and the form working together, as opposed to just like trying to create something that's so realistic, because it won't ever be as real as the real thing.
Yeah, that's a good segue to this sort of like question, which is that you talk about beauty in your talk and in your statement, but like I may find wood grain beautiful, right? Yeah. And it's natural, right? And but your pieces are made to look silver or to look gold or copper, and so you have these items that are organic, but then you put some sort of like metallic quality to them.
Yeah.
You talk about how you sort of separated those forms from maybe their natural.
Yeah. When I was originally thinking about how to finish the pieces, I had created the pieces, and then I was like, how do I make the colors? Like, should I make it look real? Should I not? And one of my professors, Michael, had actually mentioned, what's going to be the difference if you make it realistic? Like, what's the difference of that being in the gallery as opposed to just having the real plant there? And that challenged me and challenged my concept and caused me to think about how I really wanted to finish them and what I was really trying to say with my work. Yeah. And I really liked the idea of using metallics. My work has been called kitschy in the past, which some people would find that to be an insult, but I think it's funny more than anything, because, I don't know, I feel like sometimes artists take themselves way too seriously. I mean, we're all trying to say something, but we don't have to get so upset about it all the time. And like my owls, I used glitter and I used sequins and I used rhinestones, things that are very childlike and playful, and I wanted to have a little bit of that, but still have it be more serious. And experimenting with the spray paint and finding this metallic surface, it removes the pieces from, they're still the representative of something natural, but it like removes them from that because they're representing something that is bigger than just nature. You know, it's an idea that should encompass everything. Like, beauty is found in imperfections. That's what makes us unique. That's what makes us different. And I liked how the color palette, it just like covered the entire surface and just made it one thing, and it was really beautiful. And I just really like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I really enjoy the way that they turned out. They weren't what I expected in the least, but it's a good surprise.
I think we're going to go over our 10 minutes, but I want to ask you just a couple of quick little questions, which I think will be kind of fun to, ask. What time of day do you feel most creative?
When nobody's around, very, very early in the morning, or like when it's pitch black outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you listen to music when you're
sometimes I listen to music, and sometimes I like to play Netflix, like TV shows or movies. I just have to have background sound going on. Something, yeah.
Is there anything that you're reading right now? Or maybe what's the last book that you read?
I started to read the book Wild. They made a movie out of that.
Okay.
And I would like to, over break, hopefully read a little bit more of that, because it's good. But I want to, give it the proper time to digest.
What's the most challenging thing about working in your medium?
The most challenging thing, I think it would be to not necessarily compare myself all the time, because I am a hand builder, and a lot of people just kind of cast off hand building and sculpting, and they tend to gravitate more towards functional pieces. And so to just challenge myself to not get in a rut sometimes about not throwing and doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And to keep it fresh, to try new things.
And then maybe the last question would be, what's next?
What's next? Next, I will be working and relaxing, taking a semester to just do nothing for a while, and hopefully start exercising and sleeping again.
So I'd like to thank you. And I'd also like to thank you all for your time and your interest in the professional practice and the creative endeavors of our students and our artists here at North Dakota State University. So thank you, and from everyone here at the Memorial Union Gallery, get creative.